This video was prepared by FHWA. It's actually on their local government project, part of their website, but it applies to state agencies as well. A few things in here that I know I was gratified to see. If you're interested, they also have one for railroad coordination and railroad certification on projects as well. You can just search them online. They're really pretty easy to find. So it's about 6 minutes. We'll just watch it real quick.
Stretching far back into our nation's history, government agencies have permitted public utility facilities to use and occupy the rights of way of roads and streets. Accommodating utilities within the right of way provides a more economic and reliable delivery of public service commodities such as water, electricity, communications, and gas. This relationship between utilities and public rights of way benefits the general welfare, safety, and health of our citizens. Today, as you prepare for the construction phase of a federal aid highway project, there is a good chance impacts to utilities will occur. If you are not prepared for these situations, utility delays can cost the project more money and have a negative impact on the schedule. In order to avoid this problem, state departments of transportation and local public agencies, or LPAs, are required to coordinate their projects with utility owners. We are going to discuss how such coordination can help avoid unnecessary delays or project costs, and what you will need to provide to certify that the appropriate coordination has taken place.
All federal aid projects require the submittal of a utility certification to confirm the appropriate and adequate coordination has taken place prior to construction. This utility certification is required for all projects, including those that don't affect any utilities. The utility certification is submitted as a part of the project plan's specifications and estimates package, otherwise known as a PS&E. The PS&E approval is a major project milestone and must be obtained before any federal aid project can be authorized to be advertised for construction. Utility delays are one of the primary reasons for increased costs and schedule delays during the construction phase of a project. As the number of utilities on a project increases, the complexity for coordinating schedules and work activities also increases. If during the design of your project you recognize the utility relocation will be complex, you should allow extra time for this coordination to take place. Proper and early coordination of utilities will help ensure a better managed project during the construction phase. Another major consideration is that each year, accidents on construction sites lead to injury or death, reminding us that coordinating our work with the utilities is also important for safety reasons. For example, let's say a project requires excavation in a location where an underground gas line exists, but the construction plans either don't show it or don't show it in the correct location. This situation can be dangerous and is why most agencies across the country have laws that require everyone to locate underground utilities before they dig. What if a crane has to operate in close proximity to an overhead power line? Rather than expecting the contractor to carefully work around those power lines, perhaps taking the necessary steps to temporarily move the line will make the project safer to construct. As you are developing your federal aid highway project, here are some valuable strategies that should help you avoid problems and meet the challenges of coordinating with utilities. Identify any potential utility facilities within or near the limits of your project, and determine if construction activities will affect any of them. Communicate with each of the appropriate utility owners or operators to determine the location of the utility and potential conflicts during construction. Coordinate with the utility to determine if there are any special requirements during construction. This may include temporary or permanent relocations, protection of the utility during construction, or identifying specific timeframes when the utility cannot be taken out of service. If relocations are required, Coordinate with all utilities to determine relocation schedules. If utility relocations will occur during the construction phase, include the details of the arrangements in the bid documents so bidders can consider how it may impact the overall construction schedule and take this into account when submitting their bids. Include the location and contact information for all utilities on the construction plans to help your contractor locate utilities and avoid potential conflicts. After the appropriate utility coordination has occurred, the utility certification for the project must be included when you submit the project PS&E for approval. Authorization to advertise a project for bids can only be given after the project PS&E is approved. As part of your project's utility certification, you should include a statement to address one of three possible project circumstances. No utility facilities will be affected by the project. This is appropriate for projects that won't have an effect on any utility facilities during construction. All utility work will be completed prior to the start of construction. This is appropriate when utility work is necessary, and work will be completed prior to the start of construction. Arrangements are made to have utility work undertaken during construction. In this circumstance, you must also indicate as part of your certification that appropriate notification will be included in the bid proposal, notifying all prospective bidders of any utility work that will occur concurrently with the project construction.
Remember, utility coordination and certification requirements apply to all federal aid construction projects. Contact the Utilities Office from your state's Department of Transportation if you have questions regarding utility coordination or certification on your federal aid project. You can help prevent unnecessary delays, added costs, and unsafe situations during the construction of your federal aid project through early coordination with utilities.
What I really appreciated about that video is that it clearly states the importance of having utility schedule information and including it in the bid documents. And the notifications that are required, especially if you get into a situation where you're facing potential non-compliance by a utility company. But the importance of having accurate utility scope and schedule information in the bid documents, I think, is kind of pointed out in it being part of the intent of a utility certification. We're getting ready to go into a section on different project delivery methods. This is a little graphic. It's been around for a long time. That was used to explain to utility companies the difference and the advantages to the Department for Design Build and the CMGC process. I think they're all pretty familiar with the different delivery methods now. But we're going to talk about some of the specifics of the different methods. Again, we talked earlier, the project delivery network isn't the only or the beginning of where utility considerations should be taking place. During the environmental process, it's important that if you have significant utility right-of-way issues or considerations or any other major requirements, these should be taken into account during the environmental phase and the concept phase when you're putting together the scope of your project. We're going to talk about the project delivery network, the construction management network, and the project closeout network a little bit as well. The project delivery network was updated at the end of 2015. Again, it points out the complexity and the necessity of the different disciplines to be working together to deliver a project. Relative to utilities, there were a couple of things in the new project delivery network. There's now a track for CMGC projects with constructability reviews, risk workshops, and probable cost considerations or discussions taking place at each one of the project phases. There were some additions to the utility certification requirement. Again, you're certifying that all arrangements have been made and that the construction, the proposers or the bidders will be notified of utility work occurring concurrently with the construction project as part of the contract documents. Utility construction services, there was some additional tasks required, basically trying to strengthen the passover, the handoff between the design phase of the project and the construction phase of the project. And some discussion about the contractor's responsibilities with respect to preparing the baseline schedule and coordinating with third parties. Having information included in the special provisions. And also, remember that the region utility leader position now is intended to be more of a resource to the construction phase of the project as well. They're part of the escalation process if administrative orders are being considered. So just to make sure that that communication is taking place during the design phase and the construction phase.
When would that utility certification be required on the design build project? Would it be at the 30% documents, or?
We can talk about the utility consent letter when we get to the design bid build.
That certification that they just saw the video on, that be done while you're doing the design and the design build, or at the bridging document stage?
I believe the consent letter, and when we get to design build, again, I think I have a little section on it. I haven't experienced it personally, but the intent of it is, when you have a master agreement situation, is that arrangements have been made in the general term. The consent, the master agreements are either fully executed or nearly executed, but the project or the supplemental agreements will come after that. So I think it meets the intent of the utility certification, if not the letter of it.
I believe that's part of the RFP in those design builds. I'm pretty sure. Somebody, if I'm wrong, correct me. But.
And there is a template of the consent letter as an appendix in the manual itself. So if we get a chance, if we have time, I think from experience now of giving this presentation, I don't think we'll go all the way to 12:30, but if we have a little bit of time at the end, we can kind of scroll down through the new manual too, and you can kind of get a feel for the information that's in there too. This is a little graphic that we pumped up a little bit with the utility coordination tasks from the PDN. There's a kind of a task track for utility relocations that are designed and performed by the utility companies themselves, and also for utility relocations, maybe local agency facilities that are designed and performed as part of the construction contract. We also made a particular point of adding some right-of-way tasks to this graphic to kind of emphasize the importance. There's been a lot of focus put on improving the way we address and the time that we address utility right-of-way issues from the very beginning of the design of a project, and actually preferably during the environmental phase. But in addition to just determining eligibility for reimbursement, it's important that we're looking ahead to replacement of utility rights instead of finding out towards the end. The right-of-way division is also putting a lot more emphasis on determining if the utilities have property interests in their locations, rather than just looking at the apparent owners of the property. that the utilities may be on. The right-of-way department also just updated their design manual just very recently. So if you work in right-of-way or coordinating right-of-way issues as part of your utility responsibilities, there is a chapter in the new right-of-way, updated right-of-way design manual for utilities specifically. And also, at the time of utility certification, the right-of-way certifications are going to be making sure, and prior to the right-of-way certification, they're going to be making sure that the utility property issues have also been addressed before they issue their certification for advertisement as well. The point, and as I said about the project delivery network, it's important that utility coordination be included in all of the other, integrated into all of the disciplines and coordinated with all the way from the environmental phase, right-of-way, roadway design, structures, drainage, signals and lighting, and landscaping. Utilities need to be part of the consideration for all the disciplines. We're not going to spend a lot more time on the design phase. The construction phase, there's a section in the manual about the construction phase, an overview of utility construction management, requirements for coordination meetings, all the way from including utilities in any mandatory pre-bid meetings that they have, at least giving the contractors the opportunity to ask questions, even if, as you know, they don't always take those opportunities. And then a discussion about advanced relocations. There are times when they're appropriate, sometimes they're not. And then there are the new 2017 standard specifications. A lot of people haven't actually administered a project yet or even started one with the new specifications. But there are some important things and some important changes in the new general requirements of the standard specifications that we can just do a quick overview of. Section 555 is where the limitation of operations section is. This is typically where the utility information, schedule information, we talked a little bit about, well, even the video talked a little bit about utilities having periods of time seasonally or for whatever reason that they can't interrupt their services. These are pretty generally known. You know, irrigation facilities can't be impacted certain times of the year. Other telecommunication companies have notification requirements to their customers of when their services are going to be turned down. So any and all information that can be included about the utility companies and the individual work on that project should be included as special provisions to the limitation of operations. The definition section includes a description for delay, excusable delays, compensable delays, non-compensable delays. It's important to be familiar with, for the contractor to be familiar with, and also some requirements for determining when a delay is compensable with time or with money. The schedule and narrative section, baseline construction schedule, does have requirements for contractors to include interaction with third parties in their baseline schedule. This is the time when the utility companies and the contractor would be working together for the utility to understand what the contractor's schedule is going to be and to acknowledge that that's consistent with the information they provided to the department in advance, and they need to work that out, any areas of mutual concern, and the resident engineer needs to have written documentation that that coordination is taking place. And if there are any changes to that schedule, the department's responsible to make sure that the utilities are informed of that. Control of work section, the utilities section. There's an additional requirement in there for the contractor to coordinate with local fire districts if there are going to be any access issues with fire hydrants, not work directly on them necessarily, but anything that would restrict the agency from accessing fire hydrants when they need to. The new section on change management talks about the contractor's responsibilities if an excusable delay is anticipated. And this isn't just in utility terms, it's for any kind of delay that the contractor could experience. There are requirements that they notify the resident engineer in advance. Hey, if this situation happens, we're going to have a delay. They're going to need to evaluate it not only during their baseline schedule update meetings, but also there are requirements in there for them to start accumulating and identifying operations that are going to be specifically delayed and to start accounting for the cost of those delays. So if there's going to be any consideration as part of granting an excusable or compensable delay to a contractor, that documentation has to exist for that justification, as well if it is then further used by the department to seek a remedy against a utility company. So the first requirement is that everybody's nose be pretty clean in terms of making sure that the required communication and schedule agreement has taken place. And then, of course, again, if you've been trained on the new change management standard specification, there are requirements for potential change orders and a few other things leading up to a compensable delay. And then in the survey section of the new standard specifications, it requires the contractor to take survey shots, survey grade, to gather survey grade information on any uncovered, relocated, or new utility facility at 1 foot intervals. And that's something I guess that the contractors are just becoming aware of, but the department is going to be making a commitment to start gathering as-built information and existing information on utility facilities, and it's the contractor's responsibility. The utility companies are required to do it themselves as part of the accommodation rule, and now the contractor is going to be required to start gathering that information during construction. As far as the resident engineer's responsibilities for keeping the documentation that's going to be necessary in case a situation arises for a potential administrative order or remedy against a utility company, the construction office has prepared a flow chart and some procedures, including that escalation ladder for situations, but it provides guidance to resident engineers for pre-construction meeting, pre-construction documentation requirements, baseline schedule preparation requirements, revised schedule requirements, notification of work requirements, and performance documentation requirements for resident engineers and what they should do in each of those situations. Again, if the department chooses to pursue a remedy against a utility company, the the supporting documentation is going to be vitally important in making that determination. Right now, this information is on the Construction and Materials website under What's New. The Construction Division is also updating their manual of instruction as we speak, partially to capture the Masterworks changes, the new standard specifications, and this information will be included in their updated manual of instruction as well. But until then, it's on their website under What's New. The invoicing and closeout phase of construction. There's an overview of the forms. Again, those are going to be changing. The utility billing management isn't the first thing that Masterworks has captured. They've been working on construction contract management, and then moving into bidding. But there is some guidance in the manual for that now. The project closeout network, and some guidance on progressive and final billings and responsibility. Utility coordination for pavement rehabilitation and preservation projects. Again, you know, utility certifications are required, whether or not utilities are impacted at all. So a utility certification is still required. The department's guidelines were updated in March of 2014. The guidelines for the project say that there shouldn't be any substantial utility work required on these projects other than incidental work such as raising manholes and a few other things like that. But occasionally it sounds like drainage correction and a few other things kind of seem to sneak into these projects. When they do, remember that the notification requirements of the state code to all of the utilities that are potentially affected are in place. They need to know the project is coming. Arrangements need to be made. It isn't something that utility companies should find out about once the project is underway. So make sure that if that stretching of the guidelines for these kinds of projects includes impacting any utility companies, that all of those requirements are met. CMGC projects. The manual includes a general overview of the project delivery method. We've added in there a little summary of the project delivery network tasks that have been added to the PDN, including the constructability reviews, risk workshops, and cost analysis. And then there's a little narrative in there about the advantages and challenges for CMGC projects. And it used to just be challenges in the fact that it's one of the fastest delivery methods that the department has been using. For me, there are advantages to it as well, and this is my opinion. This is my personal favorite, having worked on a design build project and CMGC projects. It's my personal favorite delivery method for utility issues, primarily because you can't have a process that involves constructability risk and price determinations or discussions without having utility issues being in the crosshairs of impacting those factors. So it's always been good for me to see a project taking a practical and complete look at their utility situation, where in some cases it isn't given necessarily the resources and the time that it should be. But in this delivery method, especially with the contractor being involved, I see very positive outcomes in terms of planning for your utility relocation and your utility issues with the project's eyes wide open. Also, you have a contractor who's motivated to remain cooperative with the department and the third parties right up until when the construction contract is negotiated. So that's a real positive situation in my mind. I've seen a lot of real good things happen under this delivery method with related to complex utility situations. There's a section in the manual for utility coordination on design build projects. Again, a general overview of the delivery method. There are some steps that are provided for project teams to use during the procurement team, or the procurement phase, the implementation phase, and then some alternative measures that are available in the design build delivery method. They're kind of based on lessons learned from the first couple of big design build projects that UDOT did. They're definitely scalable. I mean, depending on the scale of the project, all of the steps may be recommended. Again, they're recommendations. They're not requirements, but it's a good overview of what's been successful on projects. There were a couple of tweaks to the design build section. One of the things that's been shown to be valuable is to have a member of the design build team acting as a permits officer on the design build project. That has shown to be a benefit. And also there's a little bit of changes in managing communication between the bidders and the utility companies. Making sure that the utilities, that the proposers have access to the utility companies, but that they're not overwhelmed, and to make sure that they're getting consistent information from the utility companies, so there's a little bit of guidance there. But again, these are lessons learned. They're best practices. They're there for, as a tool, hopefully to help with a little consistency in design build delivery situations. As I mentioned, we added a section on utility coordination for local government projects. This is, it's just a little bit more detail, a little bit of focus on utility-specific issues for the projects that complements what's in the local agency guide on the local government website. Again, an overview of local government projects. FHWA allows local agencies allows UDOT to assist local agencies on projects to ensure that they meet all the federal requirements for the funding. But the local agencies also have unique responsibilities on these projects as well. Again, the Utah code that was put in place for notification of local agency projects has to be met. The local agencies and their, the managers with UDOT that are working with them need to make sure that they're following all the requirements of that rule. And that includes the local agencies being responsible to determine whether the utility companies are eligible for reimbursement of any of their relocation costs. And whether that's based on local franchise agreements or ordinances, it could be different for every city. It could be different for different utility companies. It frequently is. But I know historically we had an assumption that utilities just were not eligible under their franchise agreements. But again, it's the local agency's responsibility to determine that. Some have ordinances, some have franchise agreements that are clear on the issue, others are mum on the issue. They say nothing about reimbursement. We had a situation, I don't think it will hurt necessarily to say Questar's franchise agreements, where they had a clause in their agreements with a city that did a local government project that said if they were using purely local funds for a project, city funds, then Questar would move at their own expense. But if they were using state funds or federal funds, then Questar would be reimbursed 100% for their relocations. And that wasn't apparent to the project team, even back when the project was conceived. There was no funding put towards any utility relocations as part of the project budget. No reimbursement agreements were prepared in UDOT's format for the project. And after Questar came out, they did their relocations, and at the end of the project, they sent a bill to the city, and the city had no money. The project had no money. It was too late to find that out. We have worked with the local government engineer with the department to have some of these issues brought up during their yearly meetings with all the cities and the counties. But at the end of the day, those of you that are working on local government projects, it's their responsibility to figure out what their ordinances say. If there are reimbursable relocations, make sure it's included in the project concept, it's included in the budget, and that UDOT format reimbursement agreements are provided. Again, as federal funds can be used for the relocations as long as it's in compliance with the local agency's laws or ordinances. Richard, you had a comment?
I just wanted to add, unless it's changed, if the utilities are located in the state's right-of-way, they are reimbursable on a local government project for the portion that's in the state's highway right-of-way.
Thank you.
That's a good issue.
Local agencies are also responsible to certify that they have an accommodation policy of their own and that it is equal to or greater, offers greater protection than UDOT's policy offers. Basically, I think the feds want to make sure that their investment in local roads is protected from a safety aspect and from an operational aspect in terms of how the utilities are allowed to use that right-of-way. And then utility certifications are required on local government projects like any other federal aid project, and it needs to be issued by the local agency itself. They're responsible for meeting the requirements of the utility certification as we saw in the video earlier. The utility accommodations section, like I say, we've expanded it a little bit more to give an overview of the accommodation manual in its entirety, not just permits. But there is a section about encroachment permit requirements, how they're prepared, who reviews them at the region level, construction and inspection requirements. Fees are charged for encroachment permits for construction and inspection, inspection of construction, inspection of traffic control. The maintenance responsibility for facilities is all on the utility companies themselves. And again, we talked a little bit about the process for and the importance of granting deviations in appropriate situations to utility installations going forward. Does anybody have any questions about the manual, about the kind of information you can find in there? Like I say, we tried to touch on some of the things to be specifically aware of what's new. Garrett's going to take a few minutes now and talk about what's on the horizon for the utility program, what's coming up. I think there's some pretty exciting stuff that's going to help implement some of the other new requirements. So I'll turn that.
Show of hands, how many of you guys have seen this interchange agreement tracker at all? Nobody? Okay.
I'm
Good. That's good news, guys. So this is something we're going to be phasing into all of our agreement tracking for all of our projects with UDOT. What this will do is really allow us to track when these agreements are happening, and it's kind of a ball and court system. This will show when we've sent it to a utility company for signatures, when we've gotten it back. This kind of allows us to really have our documentation formalized. If you guys need login information for this, because you guys will be required to use this for interaction with UDOT projects, please let me know. We can get you set up. Elena Spindler can get you set up with a login. But this goes through our interchange.udot.utah.gov website. And if you guys need me to repeat that, please let me know. But another thing that you can do on there is upload documents. CenturyLink can upload documents, or any utility company that you're working with can upload things. You can email through there. But this should help us quite a bit.
Is this set up on a project basis then?
Yes, yes it is.
Whose responsibility is that to set up?
It loads in through EPM, and then the agreement or the utility leader in each region will be responsible for loading in all the documents and stuff like that. Another good feature that it has is it has the project map on there when you guys pull up these projects. It's kind of helpful for when you're talking to these utility companies. They can at least be like, in reference. Go ahead.
So will it be in Masterworks or?
I don't know how that interaction with Masterworks is going to work at this point.
I think this is going to stay on interchange.
Yeah. As far as I know, it's going to be its own standalone basis.
Well, but in terms of how Masterworks, it's kind of a documentation tool. It's not a communication tool, but it is going to establish, dates. Things like the authorization for design engineering expenditures will be issued through this to the utility company, and then that's documented. Project managers will have access to this. Utility companies will have access to it, but only for their own entries. So it's going to keep track if you issue an authorization to proceed with design, that's an audit milestone. Or if you request a document or you set a deadline for something, we'd like to receive your plans and your right-of-way documents, your as-built plans or whatever by a certain date. It will keep track of that duration. Again, you've got a negotiated duration of what's reasonable for having that information provided. And then it's going to send reminders to the utility companies through emails that, okay, your stuff is due in a week or whatever access it is. So it's going to document a lot of those milestones that are going to be necessary for these other purposes, plus also serve as just improving performance by everybody who's involved with it, including the utility companies. But if they fail to timely do those, it'll be documented through here. So, and then there are other things they can make comments. Remind me what these are. There's the map. They can document comments or anything. Similar to Masterwork, it's going to keep a record of all the communication that goes back and forth between the project and the utility companies. So.
All right, and Elena is putting together a training video on that as well, so that's coming. So anybody got any questions about this? Cool.
What's your contact information?
I'll give you my card afterwards. That's all right. The next thing coming is we're going to be mapping a lot of utilities through GIS. This is in the future, and this is part of that specification that Patty was talking about, where we want the survey stuff. This should be a good, useful tool to really find out where our utility conflicts are in reference to the projects. A lot of times where it's kind of vague where we're talking about and what's going on, but this really helps. So this is in production, it's coming. We don't really have a date of when this is going to happen yet, but.
And I think this is also on interchange. And this doesn't replace the spreadsheet format for, you know, the utility conflict matrix that we're already used to. So you're still going to have all of that information and all of that resolution of individual utility conflicts. This is just kind of a visual representation, you know, of where those conflicts are. And as they're resolved or addressed, by the project, it'll click them off of this visual representation, but it's just a tool.
How does the spreadsheet format compare to the, or associate with this utility conflict matrix? Is it gonna like fill in and automatically fill in somewhere else, or you have to like go into both of them?
I think you have to go into both of them, as far as I'm aware, and then it should be mirror it, right? You would hope. Okay. And then adding on to this, our next slide, where we're going in the future, we're really looking to build this 3D database for utilities. Again, this is part of our survey spec. We want to get that XYZ coordinates. This should be our next level of coordination with utilities and being able to map these conflicts. Again, I don't know when this is coming in the future, but it is happening. We're in production. Probably in the next 2 to 3 years we'll be using this. This won't replace anything, but this will be another useful tool for us to be using. As you guys can see, we'll be able to tell a lot more than we currently do for our conflicts.
Well, and I think it's anticipated that this information is going to be valuable, you know, for the permits people at the region level as well. This is going to be available to them. At least they can assess a potential situation and determine if the utility company should be required to do subsurface utility engineering. There's a lot of discussion about gathering. I mean, you've got to start somewhere. Let's put it that way. You know, it won't be. It's not going to be the full picture of a given situation, but it's going to be a start at the project level as well as at the permitting level to start keeping this stuff. But the utility companies are the ones that are still responsible, you know, to provide their locations and, you know, and information about their own facilities. Even the things that are uncovered and captured by a contractor may not necessarily be totally identified, where the utility company should have more detail about what a particular facility is, what's in a conduit, and a few other things like that. But it's a start. And it'll be a useful tool as well.
That's all I had. Anybody have any questions about any of that? Cool. Patty, what about you?
Okay. Well, I was just going to maybe scroll through it if I can. I say we've added abbreviations and acronyms. We've added definitions, hyperlinks where appropriate. But especially where you get down into the laws and rules and regulations, like I say, hyperlinks to all of them, hyperlinks to other UDOT websites, hyperlinks to for the different utility tasks in the PDN. There is a utility design checklist in the QC process. So just so you get an idea when whatever you're looking for in the manual, hopefully all of the support documentation that you need will be right there in one spot for you as well while you're using it. So hopefully it'll be a useful tool. We've caught it up with what's happening right now. It's a point in time document. Things are still going to continue to change on a regular basis, but I think I think it should really serve you well going forward with the new rules and the new specs that we have right now. So thank you all very much for coming.